Takže všechny nás vítám u dalšího let's play kanálu StaySteak. Já jsem Katamurlok a dnes hrajeme hru Stanley Parable. Za 6 dní bude vycházet takový remake, se dá říct, této hry. Stanley Parable HD a už od něj vlastně vyšlo demo. A tak jsem si tak řekl, že bych mohl udělat let's play na všechny tyhle tři a udělat takovou sériečku. Takže jo, jdem do toho. Kapitola první. Jinak budu překládat asi, co nejvíc budu zvládat, ale lepší zase asi bude, jestli to budete překládat sami. No, to tak všechno. Takže kapitola první. Stanley Parable.
This is the story of a man named Stanley. Stanley worked for a company in a big building where he was employee number 427. Employee number 427's job was simple. He sat at his desk in room 427 and he pushed buttons on a keyboard. Orders came to him through a monitor next to his desk, telling him what buttons to push, how long to push them, and in what order. This is what employee 427 did every day of every month of every year. And although others might have considered it soul-rending, Stanley relished every moment that the orders came in, as though he had been made exactly for this job. And Stanley was happy. And then one day something very peculiar happened. Something that would forever change Stanley. Something he would never quite forget. He had been at his desk for nearly an hour when he realized that not one single order had arrived on a monitor for him to follow. No one had showed up to give him instructions, call a meeting, or even say hi. Never in all his years at the company had this happened, this complete isolation. Something was very clearly wrong. Shocked, frozen solid, Stanley found himself unable to move for the longest time. But as he came to his wits and regained his senses, he got up from his desk and walked out into the hallway.
Takže naše jméno je Stanley a jsme teda ten pracovník číslo 427. A naší prací bylo tady jak sedět a na tuhletu blue screen of death, bych tomu říkal, nám chodily rozkazy. No a podle těch rozkazů jsme se řídili a mačkali jsme podle toho každý ten čudlík. A přestože by to někteří nemohli dělat tu práci, že by z toho bolel mozek a strašně by se nudili a tak Stanley, ten proto byl prostě přímo dělaný a dělal to každý den, každýho měsíce, každýho roku. A vlastně ho to bavilo. Měl tu práci rád a byl pro ní prostě jako stvořený. A pak jednoho dne už mu nepřišel žádný rozkaz. Na téhle hře je podle všeho zajímavý to, že máme dělat to, co nám řekne ten vypravěč, ale když to neuděláme, tak ta hra furt pokračuje. Takže vlastně je na nás, jaký uděláme. Nebo co vlastně uděláme. Tak oklikám, vypadá, že to nefunguje. Jo. OK.
Stanley decided to go to the staff lounge to check on his co-workers. He never functioned well by himself and constantly needed support and guidance from others, so the thought of total solitude was terrifying to him. When Stanley came to a set of 2 open doors, he entered the door on his left.
Takže máme jít do dveří nalevo. Nevím, co si vybrat. Máme jít nalevo, nebo napravo. Nalevo, nebo napravo. Jdu napravo. Jsem tak rebel.
This was not the correct way to the employee lounge, and Stanley knew it perfectly well. So he turned left at the first open door and walked back in the right direction.
A tady savenu, abychom se sem potom mohli vrátit. Tak, save. A nejdřív půjdu teda tudy, tou špatnou cestou.
Stanley was so bad at following directions, it's incredible he wasn't fired years ago. Maybe this is why everyone had left. No one wanted to be around someone as bad at listening as him. And since he was walking into the middle of nowhere and thus ruining the entire story, Stanley decided that he would punish himself. So when he came to the elevator and the doors opened, he stepped inside and pushed the button to go up.
Takže ta nová teorie toho, proč jsou všichni pryč, je, že ho všichni nechtěli poslouchat kvůli tomu, že tak strašně neposlouchal a prostě všichni zmizeli, protože ho tak strašně nesnášeli. A Ikon se chtěl potrestat, takže byl nahoru. A jdu dolů.
Oh, Stanley. You know, you really aren't going anywhere, and I don't say that deceitfully. I truthfully mean that there isn't a story down here. The story was back up where I told you to go in the first place. Right now, you're just running around looking at empty halls. And frankly, that's perhaps even more infuriating for me. So why don't you throw me a bone, give me a chance, and just let me tell the story I want to tell, hm?
Je trošku strašidelný. Takový stejný všechno.
Now listen carefully. This is important. Stanley walked through the red door.
Ne. Budu teď dělat úplně všechno špatně.
Aha, perhaps you misunderstood. Stanley walked through the red door.
Promiň, vypravěč.
I still don't think we're communicating properly. Stanley walked through the red door. All right, fine, go ahead, Stanley. You want to know so badly what's out there? You want to find out what lies at the end of this road you've chosen? Well, don't let me stop you.
Whoa!
You see? It's nothing. No one's even built this section of the map because you were never supposed to be here in the first place. It's just a bunch of skybox and dev wall textures. That's it. Is this what you were looking for? Was it worth ruining the story I'd written out for you? I put a lot of time into that, and now you... Well, here you are now, just looking at nothing. To think that that's all I needed to make in the first place, just a whole lot of nothing, and you would have been happy. Well, hey, you still need a little something to do. Am I right? Here, let me load up another map. See if there's something in here that'll keep you occupied.
Takže nám loadne jinou mapu.
Here's one. Let's boot this up. We'll see if you like it.
Trošku se bojím. Aha. To je z Half-Life 2, že?
Well, Stanley, is this any better? I don't know why it would be. This map wasn't even made for you. At least I created a world specifically with you in mind. I wanted to make you a leading man. This one, well, I'm afraid you're on your own there.
Mám vůbec ještě pokračovat? Teďko jako odehraju celý Half-Life,
Stanley
nebo?
was fat and ugly and really, really stupid. He probably only got his job because of a family connection. That's how stupid he is. That, or with drug money. Also, Stanley is addicted to drugs and hookers.
Co? Je tlustej, ošklivej a je závislý na drogách a děvkách. A dostal se k té práci přes rodinný konekce, nebo přes drogy, nebo štěstí.
Hold up, Passport. I spent so long talking about you. Why don't we just take a break from that and talk about something else for a change? Let's see. Well, according to Wikipedia, more than 90% of the night sharks caught off northeastern Brazil contain mercury concentrations higher than that considered safe by the local government. Now, this is fascinating. Don't you want to know more about the night sharks? Oh, no, of course not. All you want to hear about is yourself, isn't it? Well, fine. You haven't listened to me once so far. I can't expect you to turn that around now, can I?
Ow.
Is this the end of the line? I don't suppose this was a particularly fulfilling experience for you, considering not a single art aspect in this map was created. Wait. Hold on. What are you doing?
To sakra jsem. Tam světlo na konci tunelu. Já se fakt bojím.
Stanley, don't do that. I can't follow you there. I can't help you.
Co je?
How will you write a story without me? You can't do it. You know that. Stanley, come back.
To je nepříjemný. Je Slenderman. Tak ho jedem znova. Halo? Vypravěči. Vypravěči, kde jsi? Pomoc. Prostě nějaká jiná dimenze. Vypravěči. Asi jsme ho ztratili, hej. OK, tak to je jeden ending, ten je docela zmatený. Tak jo, takže loadnu save a dáme si další.
Stanley decided that he would punish himself. So when he came to the elevator and the doors opened, he stepped inside and pushed the button to go up.
Tak jo, takže tentokrát pojedeme nahoru. A tím se podle všeho potrestáme. Halo?
It almost perplexed Stanley that he had actually gone and stepped into this metal trap. After all, it should have been no surprise that this thing would lead him to his death. But he thought to himself, this is simply the price to pay for ruining a perfectly good story.
Nás udělali palačinku!
And willingly accepted
Já chci ven!
the inevitable end toward which he had spent so long stumbling. Farewell, Stanley.
Mám to restartovat, nebo ho mám nechat umřít? Já nevím. Ale jo, uděláme ze sebe placku.
Farewell, Stanley, cried the narrator as he sent his subject down the conveyor belt and into the enormous metal jaws. In a single visceral instant, Stanley was obliterated as the machine crushed every bone in his body, killing him
Co se vypravěče stala ženská? A proč jsem neumřel? Co se děje?
It's a shame then that for all his work it was such a meaningless victory for the narrator. Did he really think he would accomplish anything by murdering this disposable vessel? Every possible choice Stanley could make had been designed for him long before he ever set foot here. The narrator wanted to kill him. Stanley was already dead from the moment he hit start. There's no salvation for either of these two, I'm afraid. The narrator had as little power over Stanley as Stanley did over the paths that he walked. But listen to me. This story is not over. You can still save these two. You can stop the program before they both fail. Push escape and press quit. There's no other way to beat this game. As long as you move forward, you'll be walking someone else's path. Stop now, and it'll be your only true choice. Whatever you do, choose it. Don't let time choose for you. Don't...
Tohle to furt dělají.
Let time...
Takže jdem na další ending. Tentokrát jdem dole.
He entered the door on his left.
Všem toho, že většina těch dveří tady nemá kliku.
As Stanley entered the lounge, he was horrified to find not a single person here. He decided he would walk up to see his boss, hoping that he would find an answer there.
Au. Je. Takže teď můžu jít buď to dolů nebo nahoru.
Stanley walked upstairs to his boss's office.
Hrám ten dobrý ending až nakonec jdem dolů.
But Stanley just couldn't do it. He considered the possibility of facing his boss, of admitting that he had left his post during work hours. he might be fired for that. And in such a competitive economy, was it really worth taking that risk? All because he believed everyone had disappeared?
Tak
His
počkat.
boss would think he was crazy. And then something occurred to Stanley. Maybe, he thought to himself, maybe I am crazy. Everyone I know simply vanishing out of the blue, there's almost no other explanation for it. And a nagging fear began to creep up in his mind. Questions that had been there all along. He just hadn't put his finger on them yet. For example, why couldn't he see his feet when he looked down? Why did doors close automatically behind him wherever he went? And for that matter, these rooms were starting to look pretty familiar. Was he just walking around in circles? Where am I, he thought. And the more he found himself unable to answer these questions, the more questions continued to arise, until he came to the issue that had been slowly balling until he could ignore it no longer. Why is there a voice in my head, dictating everything that I'm doing and thinking? Suddenly, every door slammed shut. No, Stanley screamed. I need to get out of here. I need to know that there's something out there. I need to know it's not just all in my head. And he screamed and clutched at his skull as the voice grew harsher and the music in the background rose higher and higher. And then, moments before collapsing to the ground, Stanley clenched his fists and screamed to anyone who might be listening, I'm not real! I'm not real! Don't believe any of it! None of it's real! And then everything went black. This is the story of a woman named Mariella. Mariella woke up on a day like any other. She got dressed, went to work, clocked in, clocked out, and then she walked home. But her walk on this day was interrupted by the body of a man who had stumbled through town talking and screaming to himself, and then collapsed dead on the sidewalk. Moments after seeing him, she would turn, run to the nearest police station, and call for an ambulance. But for just a few brief seconds, she merely stood there, unable to move. The tragedy was not the death of a single person. It was that she would never know this man's story, never hear in his own words what had happened to him, or what he believed had happened to him. For to know these things would be to exist inside the head of the man himself. So all she could do was observe from a distance and pity him. But Mariella had places to be and people to meet with, very important people, whose impressions of her would affect her career and indeed the rest of her life. She stood there for only a moment, looking down at the body, and then she ran.
Okay.